Blessings, beloveds. Welcome back. Anastasia, Cosmic Astrologer. Just going to talk a little bit more about Lilith relative to the 4 different Liliths and how do you find them, what are they called, and so forth. Because I think there's a few people that might still be uncertain or a little bit confused, which is completely understandable because there are actually 4 Liliths. So let me just start off with that. So the Black Moon Lilith, right, which is the most common one that is referred to in the birth chart and in astrological software. It depends what software you're using as well. There was a viewer who asked about solar fire, so how do you find or how do you implement the right or let's not say the right, but how do you find the true Lilith or the mean Lilith in solar fire? And I addressed that question in the comments, but just to go a little bit further for those of you that may not know, if you have solar fire, you would just go to preferences right up the top. Let me just share my screen actually to make that a little bit easier to follow. Okay, so here's solar fire. We're going to take a quick look at Angelina Jolie's chart, by the way. So here's preferences. If you look up the top here, okay, you can see all these tab options. And so you go to preferences, you go to edit settings. It brings up this window and you can see just over here on the right hand side, there's the black moon. So it shows you the true apogee or the mean apogee. Okay, so that's the true Lilith or the mean Lilith. Now, in most astrological software, it'll just be set as a default on the mean position, the mean apogee. So as you can see, I've got the true highlighted. So that's where you go to make that adjustment, okay? So there are 4 Liliths. We have the asteroid Lilith, okay, which is, let's bring up Angelina's chart. I'll just move this over here. Now, there's Black Moon Lilith. Okay, that's the true position for Angelina Jolie, which places it at 9 degrees of Pisces. Now, if I go back into those settings and make the adjustment to the mean position, what happens is that that particular Lilith doesn't move very far at all, interestingly enough. It just moves to 13 degrees of Pisces, okay? The true position and the mean position can range between the difference between the two can be up to 30 degrees, which is quite significant, okay, because it can change signs as well. For Angelina Jolie, it does not. It moves to 13 degrees. So she has both true and mean in virtually the same position. Same house, same sign, just a couple of degrees apart. The asteroid Lilith, which is the only actual body that is a actual celestial body, can be found in this section here. So you go to reports, you would look at the window up here on the right, you would go to asteroids, and solar fire only has a certain amount of asteroids listed. One of them is Lilith, so let's just scroll down until we find her. There she is there. Lilith 1181 is her number. Every asteroid is numbered. And so for Angelina, her asteroid Lilith is at 2 degrees of Virgo. Okay, so we've identified that. And that places it over here in her second house, which in fact is opposite her black moon. So her asteroid Lilith in Virgo, 2 degrees, opposite the black moon in both positions, actually, in the mean and the true. Now, a black moon Lilith in Pisces in the 8th house is extremely hidden, right? But we'll get to that in a minute. So you have the true position, the mean position, you have the asteroid, which is numbered 1181, the black moon Lilith, which is the mean position, is numbered H12. The osculating Lilith, which is the true position, often referred to as the osculating Lilith, is numbered H13. So that's three Lilith we've mentioned so far, three different versions, and out of those three, only one is an actual body. The others are actual hypothetical points. In the same way that the moon's nodes, because the black moon actually connects to the position of the Earth and the moon and the nodes as well, to an extent. And the moon's nodes, they are just like the black moon is. They are points. They're calculated mathematical points. They're not actual bodies, as it were, right? And in fact, the black moon Lilith cycle is half of what the moon's nodes cycle are. So the moon's nodes cycle are 19 years. The black moon Lilith cycle is around about 8 years. Okay. So it takes 8 years for black moon Lilith to move around the entire zodiac. It takes 19 years for the moon's nodes to do an evolution around the entire zodiac. The last hypothetical point, again, that is another point of Lilith, is called dark moon Lilith dash Waldermath black moon H58. Now, I haven't really personally explored the fourth one, which is the one I just named, but that is what it's named, and you would find it under the letter and numbers H58. And so there'd be certain programs that would be able to put that in for you. I believe astro.com would enable you to put all these positions in. I haven't tried it. I've just come across that particular web page that points to that, so you can try it for yourself. And I think you just go to, you open up astro.com, you put your details in where you would draw up a chart, and you would search something, you would add an area that's called extended chart selection. You would open that box, for instance, and then you would copy and paste these numbers into the empty box in order for it to calculate these four different positions for you if you wanted to look at all four. Okay, so that's how you would go about that. So that those are the four different Liliths. The two that I work with, or three rather, is the true position, mean position, and the asteroid. I think all three have significance. I think all three can speak to you and your chart. I don't know that they do that for every single individual, because I have not looked at every single individual's birth chart. So this is, something that you would explore yourself. But, when I'm doing readings, for instance, I generally do look at both positions and the asteroid as well. One of the main distinctions, according to Tom Jacobs, who's written a book on Lilith, who I highly recommend, is a great astrologer, and his book's quite good as well. One of the main distinctions that he draws between the asteroid Lilith and the black moon Lilith, which I quite like the way he's summarized the distinction, and in a nutshell, he just pretty much says that, which makes absolute sense to me in looking at my own Lilith and just understanding this distinction. The black moon Lilith has more of a, it's such a hidden component in our psyche, because you need to understand, when if you looked at a picture of the moon traveling around the earth, so the earth would be in the center, and just imagine an oval shaped circle around the earth, which is where the moon travels. On the left hand side we have what's called the lunar perigee. The earth is in the center, the moon is traveling around this imaginary line. On the right hand side of this oval shaped line is the lunar apogee. So the terms perigee and apogee, perigee is the closest and apogee is the furthest. Let me just make sure that I've stated that correctly, because my Mercury retrograde has been playing all sorts of weird tricks even in my own mind. Just bear with me. Yes, so perigee is the closest. That what I said was correct. I just wanted to double check, because I certainly don't want to misinform anybody. Okay, so perigee is the closest and apogee is the furthest. And so if you can imagine the earth in the center, this oval shaped imaginary sort of line going around the earth. On the left hand side you have the what's called the lunar perigee. On the right hand side, which is the furthest part, is the lunar apogee. And in between there's this what's called an empty focus, or a black void. It's an empty space, okay? And that's where the black moon sits, literally in that space there. So that's the imagery, if you can just imagine that. And so therefore the black moon, the goddess Lilith herself, from that level, is why it corresponds, or why she corresponds to this deep instinctual raw, visceral expression to our beingness, or our being. And she's held very deep, deep, deep in our psyche, in the astral and ethereal sort of components of our beingness, and in very unconscious layers as well. So the asteroid Lilith, okay, which, as I showed you in for Angelina Jolie, we saw that it was at 2 degrees of Virgo, which places it in her second house. The asteroid has more of an external level of expression. It would speak to the matters in a person's life where the individual has a strong connection to the Lilith archetype, and how that plays out in the person's connection and engagement to life on external levels. So, for example, working in a context or environment where the individual fights for equality, fairness, and justice, for women's rights, or for advocating for the underdog, or what may still be considered the lower class, or whatever. An individual who is very connected to wanting to bring justice into a certain environment for certain people, right? So that would be like the external level of the asteroid Lilith. Feminist movements and groups and things like that, you would expect to see a strong asteroid Lilith present in the person's chart. Like really big deal, type of situations where the person acts as an advocate, right, as an agent to support and help people who may be underprivileged in some kind of way, or experience injustice and so forth. Whereas the Black Moon Lilith is something that's quite private, actually, and very deeply felt and experienced in our life, particularly when it comes to our relationships, but also the place that we stand in within ourselves relative to our own inner feminine from a more authentic level, I would say, because Lilith corresponds to being able to be totally authentic in the face of adversity, in the face of rejection, in the face of judgment, in the face of fear. And it's not an easy journey to take, and for many people it's a conscious choice, and for many others it's not. But Lilith will find a way to stir things up, because she's the point in the chart that triggers the deepest raw instinctual components to our being. She taps into and triggers what would most likely be very uncomfortable sometimes for ourselves, and certainly for other people. It's just a very confronting energy. And of course, it has a real dark level to it when it's projected in an unhealthy way, and in an unconscious way. Because, for instance, the Black Moon Lilith would be very present in situations that connect to abuse and abuse of power, rape, all sorts of very Plutonian, scorpionic type of themes. And just a couple of things I want to read here. So the Black Moon is related to the Moon's nodes, as I was saying before, which are also non-physical points. The Black Moon circles the zodiac in 8 years, which I mentioned before, 8 years and 10 months to be precise, which is half of the cycle of the Moon's nodes. The Black Moon Lilith has both mean and true positions, which we've identified, and that's due to its gravitational effects. The difference between them can be significant because, as I said, it can be up to 30 degrees difference from the true or the mean. Generally, a lot of people work with the mean position because it seems to be easier from the point of view of it's not so erratic in its movement. The true position is very erratic, especially when you're working with it from the point of view of transits. It can jump through 6 degrees in a day very quickly. It can go through goes retrograde very erratically, from one sign to the other, 1 degree to the other. It just if you actually observe the movement of the true position of Lilith, you will see this yourself. Just put up a chart, animate the chart. If you're using Solify, you would just go here to animate. You would even just leave it on days, and you would just click forward or click backwards, just depends which way you want to go, right? So this erratic movement makes it very difficult for prediction, I suppose you could say, in forecasting. It's not impossible; you still can. Just it's just a lot trickier in working with it, and so hence, most settings in astrology software programs just kind of leave it at the mean position. And as I said in my previous presentation on Lilith, why would you choose the mean over the true? When the mean is essentially an average calculation, right? I'm not saying that the mean position doesn't have value and doesn't point to things. It does, because even in my own personal chart, the mean and the true are actually in different signs, but they are very close in influencing sort of two houses at the same time, the ninth and the 10th. And the asteroid Lilith for me is conjunct the mean position. So I've got the mean position, the asteroid, both in the same sign on the same degree, conjunct my Pluto. And then I've got the third one conjunct my MC. So obviously there's a very strong theme that describes aspects of my life relative to the ninth and 10th house experiences, the evolution of those experiences in those houses speak through Lilith very strongly, and also in my personal relationships very strongly. So I can relate to the true, the mean, and the asteroid 100% with all three of them very clearly, without any uncertainty or doubts. And I'm fortunate, I suppose, that I can do that. I can relate to all three. It's not so clear cut for people sometimes. So it is a case of just exploring, what Lilith is saying to you through any of those positions. Just remember the distinction between the black moon and the asteroid. The black moon is more, you could say, subjective, and the asteroid has more of an objective level to her expression, and therefore we can employ an intellectual expression and understanding to what she's saying relative to wherever she's placed in the chart. The black moon is more hidden. It triggers a lot of things inside us that, as I said, are not necessarily comfortable, but the ultimate purpose of those experiences are to help us to become more authentic and free within our feminine expression, as opposed to being oppressed, repressed, and depressed for that matter. So, when you have a particular archetype that stirs the status quo, that stirs the consensus reality, it's never going to be comfortable. It's never going to be embraced. And so this is where we need to have real courage, to step outside of what's expected, what's approved of, what's validated, what's understood. And it's not easy, because, as I said in my previous presentation, you may feel quite alone in this journey, because the majority are not going to be a part of it. And so, again, there will be many people that will not take that path. It's a lot harder to step outside on your own and show true courage in the face of all the adversity or oppression, and maintain that authenticity and believing that in yourself, even though others don't. you know that's one level, and then the other level is to also realize that the majority of people who won't understand that about you or won't accept that about you, it's got nothing to do with you. That's got to do with them and what they choose to believe or follow or understand about themselves. Whether they want to live a more authentically expressed life, or whether they're just going to go along with what's accepted. It's you know, it's pretty clear cut in those ways. Then you have a lot of complex layers where, Lilith speaks very strongly in our personal relationships. That includes, with family members, partners, friends, etc., depending on obviously the location of Lilith in your chart and depending on the aspects that she has. What is she connecting to in your chart? So for Angelina Jolie, we can see that the Black Moon Lilith, which is at almost 10 degrees, is forming a square to her sun. Now, I don't know Angelina. I have not met her. I haven't spoken to her personally, so I can't, assume anything. But relative to the symbolism and the information that has been put out publicly about, specifically about her relationship between her and her father, where he left her and her mother and her brother. Actually, I don't know if the brother was born yet, so I'll withdraw that comment. I'm just not entirely sure. But I know that Angelina was between 1 or 2 years old when her father, who's a very famous actor, John Voight, he left the mother and left Angelina. And so there's the betrayal and abandonment, right? There's Lilith squaring the sun. The sun represents Angelina's father, quite apart from her own personal self, her expression, her persona, her spirit, her how she shines her light, the sun, who she is becoming, and so forth, the personality that she is. The symbol of the sun is always the father as well, in a man's or a woman's chart. So here we have Lilith forming a square. So a square is a conflicting aspect. It's a very dynamic aspect, and it's something that speaks to the life that she's lived in terms of her own development. But I think where it would have began would have been with her father abandoning her when she was just 1 or 2 years of age. And that's classic signature, you could say, of Lilith in the eighth house, squaring the sun, father. Eighth house has got to do with feeling betrayed, abandoned. Trust is completely broken. So, when you're 1 or 2 years of age and you are thrown into that life situation where, your primary caregivers, mother and father, are so crucial to your sense of safety and security, in how you will feel about life and the world and how safe you feel in the world. So to have the experience of one of those primary caregivers abandon you, eighth house abandonment, then that obviously creates an imprint in the psyche where Angelina Jolie starts to battle with, I suppose you could say, this sense of abandonment and inability to feel safe, I suppose, around men. Okay, because it's squaring her sun. Also, there is a square to Neptune. I think and Neptune's opposite her sun, which is, it's a lot of different things. It's, first of all, it's again, we can bring that to the father. When I see a sun Neptune aspect, usually the father is not present in the person's life, whether that's emotionally, psychologically, or physically for that matter. It's very, very, very typical. I've seen it over and over and over again. So that's one layer there. Neptune, Sun opposition. Father was absent, and indeed he was. They have come back together and reconciled, years and years and years later, though. The Neptune opposite the Sun is obviously describing Angelina Jolie's glamorous side, in the movies, in being a personality and actor. The Lilith squaring the Sun and squaring the Neptune, I think, brings in that archetype within her, who's this fierce femme fatale warrior type of goddess. And she does have a moon in Aries conjunct Mars as well, which also speaks to the warrior feminine, the warrior archetype. And if you think about all her films, they're pretty intense films. One's called Taking Lives. She did The Tomb Raider. She did Maleficent, which is a Disney production animated sort of kind of story, if you like. But she plays this dark sort of femme fatale in that as well. Tomb Raider, where she's this warrior figure taking lives. How's that for Lilith in the eighth house? One of my favorite movies of hers is called, where is it? It's called Girl Interrupted, and that's a movie she made with Winona Ryder. And I don't know if any of you have seen that, but you may want to watch it. It's a fantastic film about mental illness, actually, and just yeah, what people can go through with various mental health conditions that impact the life very, very strongly. And so even in that film, Angelina Jolie plays this dark, manipulative, very powerful character who ends up in a psychiatric hospital alongside of Winona Ryder, and they form this bond that is so complex, that their relationship is so complex, and the the experiences that they have together, and just how Angelina Jolie is this mastermind manipulator on every sort of level. So I see that as part of her Lilith square the Sun and square Neptune, because it's actually a T square, right, with Lilith at the apex. So it's a very strong imprint in how she expresses herself, and therefore the roles that she would play as well. That would also clearly speak to very, very deep personal layers and levels into her life that none of us know about. And why should we? They are her personal, private matters in life. But I'm just speaking to the matters that we do know of, which is the fact that she's this very beautiful, glamorous looking woman who has a real portrayal of the dark femme fatale in quite a glamorous way, because she's quite beautiful in terms of her aesthetic appearance. So we can see the black moon being pulled into the characters that she's drawn to play. And when you hear actors speak about the characters that they've played in films and why they've been drawn to certain characters, even though they are acting, a lot of the time they're just channeling components of themselves that otherwise would not be accepted, right, in the mainstream consensus reality. So it's a real opportunity to dive into material that is otherwise suppressed or not easily accessed. And so, in other words, they are really portraying just aspects of themselves that are normally hidden, and it's just an opportunity to give a voice and to give expression to those parts of their psyche and their character through movies. And so it's very therapeutic for them as well. Okay, so is there anything else I wanted to say about Angelina? I guess from the point of view of authenticity, protecting others in terms of fairness, equality, and justice, and things like that. She does have quite a few different children, most of which are adopted from different countries. That's certainly her ninth house there. But I think an interesting point to mention would be the fact that her firstborn child, who was born as a female in terms of anatomy, who was named Shyla, who identifies as a, I think, as a binary, they call it. That's the technical or correct term, which just basically means that the individual neither identifies with male or female, but somewhere in between. And so she has a child who identifies in that way, and so the appropriate way to refer to that child is as they, as opposed to he or she. And that's a pretty big deal. That's, and Angelina has publicly, expressed her support towards that child and how that child identifies and the journey that that child is taking, who's still very young, so we don't know how that will continue to unfold. We just wait and see, I suppose. But the point being that it's not easy for a mother to support that path, mainly because of the adopted sort of perspectives through culture and religion and systems, patriarchal system especially, that's been imprinted in people's psyches for thousands of years of one should be this or one should be that. You can't be both, or you can't be something in between. It's so still taboo in a sense, even though there's been a lot more support around transgender, queer, and so on and so forth, and binary, all those different levels of identity. But those people, I think, still struggle a lot relative to equality, fairness, and justice, and so forth. And so, Angelina is a very powerful public figure in that way, who has a very strong voice, to be a powerful influencer, for those sorts of new ways of identifying. And having a child who is like that, it's not a coincidence. It's I think it's a pretty, there's a big story around that, which would be very karmic in lots of ways, and is such a contributing factor to causes that she would advocate for, that are outside of the consensus reality. And I think that's strongly linked to her Lilith as well. So yeah, that's just some of my own sort of thoughts and reflections on Angelina Jolie and the three different Liliths, right? So the main position and the true position, it's the same body, so there's not a distinction in terms of meaning there. But what you'll find is that they are usually in different degrees, and sometimes can be in different signs as well. So if they are in different signs, that's when you need to really start exploring both and just seeing what is the difference for you, and how that might describe or speak to matters in your own life that are more hidden, not easily accepted or understood by others. And again, as I said, in relationships, Lilith can be triggered in a healthy and an unhealthy way. Okay, it just depends on the individuals, the nature of the relationship, the karma between them, the soul's intentions, and so forth. But if it's triggered in an unhealthy way, because Lilith is being projected in an unhealthy way, that can lead to pretty severe circumstances, pretty dysfunctional circumstances, and pretty dark circumstances that do include abuse and violence and things like that. When Lilith is activated in an authentic and healthy way, and is not projected in the context of two people in a personal relationship, then it can be the ability for both people to honor and to embrace the wild feminine in each other, which produces a level of freedom, authenticity, and the ability to be yourself. And I think that's a really important and powerful and beautiful and necessary experience to have in a relationship because, well, personally speaking, I feel that if I can't be myself in a relationship, then I wouldn't be in that relationship. That just would not work for me. And, quite a few years ago, I was in a relationship with a man who, decent guy, good soul, good intentions, very intelligent, all that sort of stuff. But the Lilith in me terrified him. And in the most obvious way and external way that that showed up was that he had a real problem with me being an astrologer. Yes, you heard right. He had a problem with me being an astrologer. He could not accept that I was an astrologer. That was not something that he could accommodate in his mind with his set of beliefs. And so that created a real issue, clearly, in our partnership because that meant that I couldn't speak about astrology. I couldn't share anything about astrology. I couldn't call myself an astrologer because he'd have such a strong reaction to that all the time. And, that's just an example of myself being in a relationship where it didn't last really long. It lasted actually a couple of years, as in just under 2 years, somewhere there, because I was, I suppose, exploring and seeing where it would go. But it just got to that level where I simply could not accept being with a person who couldn't accept me. So, that's just one example. So that can be another layer that can come up. So I'm just putting it out there because you may be somebody listening who has been in that situation or who is in that situation or something similar. So, yeah, Lilith in relationships can trigger lots of different things, and it triggers the hidden, it triggers what's not easily accepted. And at the healthiest level, it triggers those components within us where we can totally embrace our authenticity, the wild feminine that doesn't need to be oppressed or repressed, that is given a voice, that is given expression and is healthy, and it also is the point that would speak to incredible processes of personal transformation and the transformation that it can occur in a relationship as well. Because Lilith is a point that really helps us transform the layers that have been imprinted on us that would be false or fake, that would inhibit us, restrict us, and so forth. So when we can activate that raw Lilith in a visceral way, which is how she presents, it's very difficult to articulate a lot of what's going on when Lilith is activated within you and in your life, because it's just this raw energy which is visceral in the body. And so it's learning how to listen to your body and the messages that it's giving you and the instincts that come up, how to recognize that as well, and how to recognize acting on those instincts, and how that can actually bring more authenticity or more expression, raw, natural, authentic expression, power, a sense of power. And when I speak about power, I speak about power from the level of the soul in the most authentic way, which is not about abuse or control or manipulation, because power has those levels attached to it when it's projected through the personality. All right, and Pluto and Scorpio has those sides to it when it is projected through the personality. But from the soul, it has this level of personal power that, because true personal power does not come from controlling or manipulating people around you, outside of you. It comes from being truly connected and in touch with your own personal power from the level of transforming yourself. That's true authentic power, not the power that one might have over another. That's manipulative power. So there's different levels of power, you could say, and Lilith does speak to those levels of power as well, both in ourselves and how we experience it through others in terms of our relationships. Okay, hopefully that's given you more to think about, and I'll be back soon with more. Much love, much blessings. Thanks for listening. Bye for now.